It's the Church of Jesus Christ.
I'm very concerned about what I see taking place in churches across America.
The church has been compromised by perspectives like critical race theory.
I think it'll ultimately lead to a lot of ugliness that many, even within the churches, I think don't expect.
Many radical left-wing ideologies have infiltrated the evangelical church. Among these is the idea of social justice.
The evangelical church is so infiltrated by the political left, I would say the social justice warriors, and they use guilt, and they divide not just whites against blacks, but also men against women. And it's the tactics of conflict and division.
I think what you're seeing with this kind of woke invasion of even the church is how it warps the original message of Christianity, of Christ. I mean, that's what is so disconcerting about this. It is injecting essentially a secular ideology into the church itself and changing its message fundamentally. Obviously, the church has enormous influence on American society. For those who are woke or believe in social justice, they know that the church is an institution that they must control to fundamentally transform America. I think wokeism is really based on these theories of social justice. It relies much on critical race theory. I think it's this idea that America must be fundamentally transformed. It is an inherently unjust country, that is a racist country, that there is that essentially that if we want to move into an anti-racist future, to a certain extent, we have to embrace a kind of neo-segregationism.
Much of this was apparent during the summer of 2020 in the riots for George Floyd. Many evangelicals supported the Marxist group known as Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter that marched in Minneapolis, Minnesota in response to George Floyd being killed. They're supposed to be engaged in peaceful protests. Well, they quickly migrated from justice for blacks to include burning the Bibles in Portland, Oregon, denigrating the Christian cross, saying it's a symbol of white supremacy. You gotta understand, this has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with using race as a bludgeon to try to destroy civic institutions in America. It has nothing to do with race. They're using race, and they've hijacked the civil rights movement in their quest to undermine this country's founding values.
Even Campus Crusade for Christ, now known as CREW, has conformed to wokeness.
We lament that we stood by as systemic and institutionalized racism became founding pillars and structures in America and within the church. Lord, have mercy.
This country was built by white people for white people. Well, no, by slaves for white people. It was built, right, so that people could generate wealth.
On the one hand, it's shocking to see traditional evangelical groups like as it used to be known, Campus Crusade for Christ, now CREW, would start leading into a left-wing agenda. But on the other hand, the left has been brilliant at co-opting groups, taking over groups.
One of the things that is the case with people that have taken money from George Soros or others on the left is that they, in some cases, have slid in their Christian values.
The founder of the group is Bill Bright, of course, and I'm old enough to remember the old-fashioned Campus Crusade for Christ, which was a evangelical in the purest sense. I mean, it brought the gospel, right, to high school kids who needed to, and college kids who needed to hear it. So I think that its founders would be shocked to see where it has ended up today.
This begs the question, why have so many evangelicals fallen prey to these ideas of social justice and critical race theory?
The church is made up of people who are part of the culture, part of the society. They're out there at work every day in the culture, going to the same universities. Even many of our Christian universities have fallen prey to these ideologies over the last couple of generations. The culture as a whole has been discipled and mentored in these ideologies. And so because of that, it's everywhere.
I think many in the church have many good intentions maybe when they embrace this. They want Americans to, they don't want racism in America. They think that something must be done. And certainly the church has had a historical role, I think, in eliminating racism from American society. I think the real problem is that the ideology of anti-racism, of critical race theory, I think ultimately do become incompatible with the church's teachings.
Critics note that there are many differences between the Marxist view of justice and the biblical view of justice.
Social justice is essentially a Marxist concept because it holds that what we need to do to make our society a just and equal and fair society is to redistribute the wealth. We need to share the wealth in order to make ours a just society. So it really doesn't have to do with justice, it has to do with Marxism.
Biblical justice, as opposed to social justice, takes every single human being seriously. That's why it opposes abortion, for instance. Every single human is made in the image and likeness of God, and therefore each one is distinct and glorious and meant for immortal life.
There's a big contrast between Christianity and Marxism. On the one hand, Christianity enables people to find forgiveness and redemption, and that's available through Christ and his sacrifice on our behalf. However, Marxism is completely vindictive. It really has no means of redemption whatsoever.
Many have twisted the scriptures using confirmation bias to confirm their viewpoint.
Socialism is completely opposite to what the scriptures teaches because it is not free, it involves coercion, and it's also essentially theft, and it invites envy.
In the Bible, Jesus talks about unity, and we know that by our love for one another, we're supposed to be recognizable. We're supposed to be the fragrance in the world. We're supposed to be the light. But what you find in today's churches is a lot of division, a lot of infighting, and they look very much like the rest of the world.
What's so ironic about the term social justice is that it is Marxist in its roots. And Marxism has been the least just theory that we've seen in the last century at least. Over 100 million people have died because of socialism, because of Marxism, because of communism. It's all the same thing. And so the human cost is enormous.
We have to stand firm in the truth of the Word of God and fight off these bad ideologies that have slowly crept into the church.
I think wokeism in the church is incredibly divisive. I mean, even the most basic aspects of its ideology that oftentimes separates Americans based on their race. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that leads to hatred of others. It's not about loving your neighbor. It's about hating them because of their skin color, because they are different from you.
Ultimately, our response has to be clear. It has to be unambiguous. It has to be bold. Ultimately, we have to recognize that we are at war. We're not at war with people. We're at war with ideas. There is a war going on in the marketplace of ideas. We have to identify and oppose these faulty ideologies.